Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We are here again on a Monday night with our FRC workshop series, and we've got three amazing teams representing in the house. So we're going to join our hosts this afternoon to focus on scouting tips and tricks. It will include why to scout, how to become an attractive team pick, and various scouting systems. So we want to welcome Ella from 3132. Mitchell from 5584, Magna from 3132, Isaac from 5985, and Andrew from 5985. And standing by down in Victoria, we have the fantastic Ian Jessett, who is going to be monitoring our YouTube tonight and taking your questions. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I hand you over to our fantastic scouting team tonight. Take it away, guys.
Okay. So, good evening, everyone. I've got no idea how long this video is actually going to be viewed for, so hopefully we find it useful. So what we've got here is we've got three FRC teams, and we're going to be talking about scouting and game strategy in FRC with a very mangled quote from The Art of War: know your opponent, know yourself. So we're going to be taking it in turns to cover several aspects of this talk. We'll be chiming in at various points, so hopefully you'll be able to get a well-rounded opinion. So we're going to cover why we scout, what each of our individual teams look for when we're picking teams, what we recommend you should do if you want to be picked, what data points we look at when we're scouting, how to actually scout, what systems we use, what restrictions or limitations you're going to encounter, how we use it, and how we use it like before a game, and how we use it in a game. So hopefully we'll be able to cover all aspects of it, and we are going to have questions and answers after each section. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to post them up to the chat so Winona or Ian can let us know. So kicking us off on why scouting. So Magna, when you're ready.
Yep, thank you. All right, so why scouting? Why do we need scouting? Firstly, it's a great way to engage your entire team. Since only a few people get busy with pit crew and drive team, scouting is a great way to engage for the rest of the team, especially for new students, as it provides a great insight into how FRC games work and the strategy involved with it. I mean, also, who doesn't like watching matches and scouting? It also is a great way to improve relationship with other teams, and it's a great way this can help you gain benefits beyond the season, as well as like outreach collaborations in the future. It's also a great way to strengthen your past relationship with teams and meet new teams to get new merch. It also provides a great opportunity for developing different skills like analysis and strategy and etc. And scouting is a great way to induce these skills. It's also a great way to make the most out of your robots. So basically, this means that if you really want to be a competitive team or take up your gameplay by a notch, scouting can be a great way to do this. Having access to that extra data that you get from scouting can lead to great changes in your gameplay, and there will be examples on this later. Unlock a whole new aspect of FRC games, recognize patterns in gameplay ET. So I know, at least for me, having done almost 2 seasons of scouting, analyzing matches and concluding observations, predicting strategies and gameplay for me has been a lot easier. And recognizing these patterns can also really help you in the following year, because that can be the difference between having a successful season and a not really a successful season. Last but not least, scouting can win you games. I mean, really, scouting is probably the most important thing. I mean, robots are important, but the data we receive from scouting is very valuable. It can not only tell you what you need to do for the future scoutings and playoffs, but it can also predict what other teams will be doing. And yeah.
So we got any questions on the wider scout, or does anyone want to offer any other insights on that particular one?
I suppose, look, you should also mention that your team has spent, so long preparing and doing all of your design and building of the robot, right? And the way that, as you briefly touched on, but something that I think is really important is the way that it really makes the most of your robot, right? Because you don't want to let all of that effort go to waste. And it's a great way to, when you have that strategy, you really do get the most out of all of your effort.
Yeah. Also, I'll add a +1 to that. If you've spent as many hours and as much blood, sweat, and tears on building something, you sure as heck want to make sure that you enjoy using it. I will add, there's a reason win games is down the bottom. All those other benefits that are up the top that we come first, those are very real and very available to you. Winning games is never a guarantee, but it does improve your performance. But every other bullet point other than win games is pretty much a guarantee if you start playing with scouting.
Fantastic. And we do have a question from the YouTube stream. Does scouting have a benefit at alliance selection?
I'll give an enthusiastic heck yes.
Well done.
Everyone else want to add an opinion on that one?
Yeah, I mean, especially us as a team, when we are looking at who we can choose and who we can potentially team up with for alliance selection, we do look at the data, and we'll even have, a phone looking at our scouting data while we're picking a team, an alliance, right? So it's extremely important, and a lot of the larger teams who you want to probably aim to be within an alliance, they're all going to be looking at the metrics and seeing who's the best pick for them. Now, we're also going to go, that kind of takes us into the next point with data points, so I won't go too far into it, and I might leave it there, but yeah, extremely important.
Okay, shall we move on? Any other questions for Nana?
Nope, we're all good for now.
Okay, so we're going to take this one. What we look for, or what teams look for in a team they want to pick. So not every team can be an alliance captain. So in fact, you need to be prepared for that, because I know plenty of teams who've been caught out and have no idea what they're going to do when they get called up on that field. But knowing what other teams are looking for does help things as well. So Isaac, you want to start with what we look for?
Yeah, sure. So the main primary thing that we look for when we want to pick another team is we're looking for robots that complement ours. So not the ones which score the best or are the fastest, but ones that do the things that we can't do. Using Destination Deep Space as an example, our robot was very good with hatch panels, but wasn't that great with manipulating the cargo balls. So when we were generating pick lists for alliance selections at events during that season, we at the top of the list would be robots that could do that could manipulate cargo ball game pieces as quickly and efficiently as possible. And then the secondary thing that we look for is robots that fill a niche, that fit a specific function. So this might be looking for a robot that has the capacity to do a double climb with another robot, or that can access a certain part of the field. In Infinite Recharge, you might pick one robot over another because of their ability to go underneath the control panel, for instance. Or it varies from year to year, but those are the main two features that you want to be looking for. And then for the second pick, to the third robot in the alliance, by the time alliance selection gets to this point, all of the other alliance captains will have picked their first choice. So the top third of the teams that will be part of an alliance have already been selected. So instead of looking for a robot that's going to be able to score points, you want to be looking for a robot that can put up a good defense and stop the other alliances from scoring points. In particular, you want to be looking for one that has good drivers and the ability to get around the field without getting in your alliance's way. And we would very rarely pick a robot that does the same thing as yours, because then you just end up getting in each other's way, trying to access the same game pieces, the same scoring locations.
Yep. So from the non-scoring aspects, we do, at least in our team, we need a team that plays well with others. So we're talking respect, encouragement. We want a team that we know we can go through stress with and rely on each other. So that's really, really big. So getting to know other teams and being friendly at an event, and even through every match in qualifiers, you want to make sure that you are always showing GP and doing your best to help out and be helped. Reliability is probably one of the things, or being unreliable is one of the things that'll eliminate you from any contention very, very quickly. If your robot is browning out or something is malfunctioning, that's, yeah, we don't want that happening in the finals. That's terrible. We want a team that sticks to strategies. Now, as you're going through the qualifiers, it's possible but uncommon that you'll play multiple games with the same teams. So if you're in a qualifier and a strategy is suggested and you stick to it, that's a really, really good point in your favor. And it may be the only chance you get to show off just how well you can do that. Having a team that works well and understands and sticks to it is a huge thing. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, just a point of clarification there. Obviously, if something goes wrong and the best course of action is to react to what's going on the field, definitely do that rather than just blindly sticking to the game plan. But if at the start of the match you agree to do one thing and then you start by doing a completely different thing, the teams you're with and anyone who's scouting you is going to mark that down as a red flag for alliance selections.
And as we mentioned in the defense, a good driver is a big plus. Now, I may backpedal on that a little bit. Perhaps it's better to say a reliable driver is a big plus. Consistent performance, consistent good performance. And that comes through practice. So if you can do nothing else before a tournament, make sure your drivers get a lot of chance to drive the robot, get a lot of time on the stick and be familiar with how the robot performs. If you can come out of the gate driving well, that really, really stands out. And said, when we're looking for stuff, when we're in doubt, we go by the numbers. So we have scouting systems, each of these three teams, that collects information on how teams perform. And we will choose data-driven over gut feel. There are exceptions, but the data is what's going to make the choice for us. So anyone want to add anything to that one? No? Okay. So any questions on that aspect, Winona?
Nope, no questions right now.
Okay, go for it, Mitchell.
Yeah, so what we look for in terms of in a team we covered, and you can also kind of draw from what we just discussed, what you should do as a team if you want to be picked by a high level team, right? But we can also go into a bit more detail. So one really, really important thing is your game analysis, right? So before you start to build anything, what you really want to do is look at all of the pieces of a game and say, okay, what are the, this is working under the assumption that you're more of a rookie team, potentially with, less less students than some of the larger ones. So what you would probably want to look at first off is, what are the first alliance picks going to be doing? What are they going to look for in a supporting role from you? And can you work that into your robot design to meet that? And then coming off of that, right, ideally you're going to be excelling at this one task. So it's always going to be better for you if you have one aspect of your robot where you're able to, whether you're, being able to score one specific thing with one specific game object, right? You're always going to be picked more often by a better team if you are able to do one thing really, really well, rather than just being okay across the board, because that doesn't really add anything to what a team is looking for. Again, consistent performance. You don't want to be browning out. You don't want to have any code issues. You don't want to have any mechanical issues. Make sure that you spend a lot of time testing and make sure that, you don't have issues as much as possible. Of course, there are always going to be exceptions, which you can work out. Ideally, you work that out, right? So next thing, make sure you know the rules. So our team, every time there's a new game, will have a solid day where we just we don't talk about design, we don't talk about anything, we just talk about the rules of the game and do a bit of analysis and say, what do we think our robot should be doing, right? So that is extremely important, and I think it's quite easy to gloss over that fact, but definitely know the rules, know what you're looking for before you start building. When it comes to actually the game day, make sure, there's one more point. Make sure you we mentioned this earlier, practice your driving a lot. Make sure your drivers are extremely well practiced, that they know the rules and that they are able to consistently control the robot with confidence, right? So when it comes to game day, what can you do? So you should have people who are very knowledgeable with both the software and hardware of the robot, and who are able to fix problems on the fly if they do occur. Because again, when we look to pick a team, we go, okay, who's having reliability issues? That's one of the main points that we look at. And if you're able to fix it quickly and explain what went wrong to a team, then there's still a very high likelihood of you being picked. Again, be a good team player, stick to the game plan, don't go too far off and do your own thing at first unless you have to and something changes, and have very good communication. Be extremely good. Defense is an extremely important part of the game as well, right? So when it comes to what we're looking for, and we do say, as I said, be good at one thing. Your one thing could be defense, right? You could be there have been many successful defense robots who maybe aren't scoring the most points on their own, but are enabling other teams to score more points. And then that is an advantage that you can have during alliance selection. And then, the last point, be professional, but also, be a good team player, good sport, show gracious professionalism, and always, if something does change where you need to adapt your game plan or just adapt to the situation in general, make sure you're able to do that, because that is something that people are going to want to look at, right? If you have, if you start with a plan and you're in the finals, and then, the other alliance end up doing something that you didn't expect, you still want to be able to adapt to that, but make sure you communicate with everyone. And that is kind of what I think are the most important points, and that's what we discussed earlier. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add.
For me, if we're working with a team in a high stress situation, if both teams are making an effort to keep things positive, that makes life so much easier. Professional, most teams, if you're in a final, most teams are going to be some level of professional, but choosing to be positive when everything's on fire is definitely a skill that counts a lot when it comes to coping with bad situations. So I'll emphasize that one.
So we have a few questions for you. If we can just kind of stop and add those. Now, one
Sure.
question that we had that actually tabbed onto the previous section, we'll do that one first, and then I have two more questions for you, Mitchell. So the first question was, we look for good rules knowledge for a second pick team. Is that important for your team? So a team with good rules knowledge, RULES, sorry, my accent.
Well, I'll go first on that one. Yes, very much so. There are always rules that will incur massive points penalties or even disqualification. And if someone does them, over the years, I've seen plenty of teams do the wrong thing, drive into the wrong game area, a human player that steps outside a sandstorm for deep space. You name it, it's happened. And losing a game because someone didn't understand the rules leaves a very bitter taste in some people's mouths. So yeah, I would say honest mistakes happen. I mean, that's a part of the game, but yeah, knowing the rules definitely reduces the chance of that happening.
Sure. Excellent. Okay. The next question, when scouting, do you record stats and observations on all teams all the time, or do you eliminate teams from your scouting pool rather quickly?
We try and track. We'll go into this in far more detail in a later section, but to very briefly touch on it, yes, we'll record stats for each team throughout every qualification game that is played, and we don't rule them. In terms of our selection, it's potentially a different story. I think by the time we get at least somewhat close to the finals, we have a relatively decent idea of who we want to try and get into an alliance with. But definitely in terms of what data we collect and analyze, we take all of it. Yeah.
We do the same. We fully recognize the chances of a comeback. You may have a lousy start, but then you catch fire. On the flip side, you may start hot, but then something breaks and then you're out of action. So yeah, we will not eliminate from our potentials until the very end.
And also for the flip side of scouting, not just looking at the teams who you want to be on your alliance, but the teams you're going to be facing. It's always good to have more information about the other alliance than going in knowing nothing because your scouts wrote off one of the other teams as not good enough to be picked or something like that.
Well done. All right, guys, do you have anything to add to that, or shall we move on to the next section?
You're muted still, Magna.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Okay, so this is us up again. We're going to talk data points. So, so first of all, we collect information on a database. I believe a lot of teams will use spreadsheets as well. So picking your platform is a good thing. So Isaac, you want to take it from here?
Yeah. So the way we do our scouting is we track all scoring objectives and get the raw score per robot. So what this means is that for every robot on the field, we're tracking how many times they score a game piece and where they score it to. Thanks to our collaborative scouting program, which we'll talk about more later, we do have enough people on scouting to have every robot on the field being watched at all times. Other teams may not have that capability, but something that can help with that is just reviewing match footage later. If you can't, if you're not able to have enough people watching every robot, there is sometimes a score breakdown on the Blue Alliance. Worst case scenario, you can try tracking the cycle time of the robots, or you may prefer to do that instead of tracking scoring objectives. It's a per team decision to be made. You can actually get a team's average cycle time just by recording a couple of passes back and forth instead of having to watch them the entire match, which can help you scout more teams without having to focus on one the entire match. We break our data into autonomous, teleoperated, and endgame groups, both to make it easier to record and easier to process and understand afterwards when we're looking at data reports. So that way, it's also important to know whether a team is capable of, for instance, they might be able to deliver game pieces to only to low-level scoring positions in autonomous, but during teleop they have enough control to deliver to higher locations. Yeah.
So then we sort of break things into an objective data set, which is what the robot does. So like Isaac was saying, scoring game pieces or cycle times, if it breaks down, where it delivers. So that's pretty much without a doubt. That information you can even, if you miss something, you can go back to game footage on the live stream and see what happened. But we also make room for subjective data. So this is notes and opinions from scouts. So I know some teams will stick just to the objective stuff. I personally find it good to give the scouts the ability to make the call on how a team feels, or some things that you just can't get from objective information. And to be brutally honest, that's saved our bacon a couple of times now. So we're not going to be stopping doing that anytime soon.
Yeah. So examples of that being used would be noting down whether a robot was being heavily defended against or not, because that would greatly affect their performance. If the drivers looked like they were in control of the robot, or if they were still figuring out how to make it move. If they noticed the drive team arguing amongst themselves during the match, positive or negative, just little bits of information that you can't really record with pure numbers and checkboxes.
Yeah. So, whoops, typo. Get data from the Blue Alliance. It's not always that useful, but there's an awful lot of information you can potentially pull down. And at bare minimum, that's information your scouts do not have to input themselves. So anything that reduces the load on scouts is a very good thing.
Yeah, something that's something that one of the things that's usually recorded on the Blue Alliance. If there's some form of climbing end game, they usually are able to record which robots did and didn't score points for that. But for during the match game piece scoring, it tends to be the alliance as a whole rather than individual robots.
Yeah. So we also implement something, I believe we stole, it may have been from 1678 or 118, the whole steal from the best, invent the rest thing. The concept of a super scout. So unlike a normal scout who's following robots and recording facts, a super scout is looking at the strategy of an alliance or a high level performance. Where does the robot fit into the flow of a game? I've got a few kids on 5985 that regard that as a good time, and they'd be doing it all day, every day if I let them. So it does require a certain personality and set of observational skills, but that can really supplement things. And if you don't have the manpower to record facts, like all the robot facts, that is another alternate path you can head down. We also do pit scouting. Now, the first rule about pit scouting is that it's not very reliable, but you can get some important information from it. So I will infinite recharge. Knowing the robot's height and weight of every robot there is going to play a very important role in how you approach certain tasks. So asking teams what they're able to, what tasks they're able to do can sometimes be a bit misleading, but vital stats like that, my guys also take photos of each of the robots. So when we're looking at them later, oh, who was the 3132 robot? There's a picture. Oh, it's them. That's right. We know who they are now. Usually my kids will also take pictures of uniforms so they can remember. So that type of information can actually make a huge difference, particularly if you happen to be, like was mentioned before, on the field trying to do a pick and you're trying to think, who the heck do I go for? Oh, it's the purple team or the green team. That can be a big deal. So bare minimum, if you're recording data, you want to watch the alliances and their strategies, if nothing else, to give you some ideas of how to proceed. So go, Isaac.
So on the flip side of the pit scouting, if there are teams walking around in the pits and coming to talk to you about your robot, make sure your team members who are in the pit know what they're talking about and don't try to oversell your robot. Because the people scouting, if they see that your robot's actual performance and what you've told them don't line up, they'll be a bit suspicious and maybe like come around again, see how things are going, might offer some help to see if you're doing all right, or just be concerned that your team members didn't actually report the information properly. It's all from the scouting perspective. It's always better to have accurate information about the robot than thinking that it's better than it really is. And what your team might think makes a better robot doesn't always match up with the people scouting use pick list criteria.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll add that one before we get to any questions too. Don't exaggerate what your robot can do. If it's one thing that'll irritate the scouting team, it's having their effort wasted. And that's what happens. So any of you guys want to add anything to that one? Good. Okay, we got any questions on that one, Winona?
Yeah, we sure do. So I do have one question for you. And just a note for those of you out there who might be wondering what the Blue Alliance is, then Ian has very kindly put that link, and it's a very important one to know as an FRC team. He's posted that in the YouTube chat for the Blue Alliance. Now, a question for you from our YouTube folks. How do you motivate scouts to keep at that job all weekend? Aren't team members sad that they aren't hands-on with the robots in the comp? Come on, really? Do I have to scout?
You want to go first, Mitch?
Yeah, sure. So we're about to touch on that in just a second, but realistically, scouting is, I mean, as we've kind of shown, it's one of the most important parts of the competition. In terms of motivation, a lot of teams with the manpower will tend to rotate every few games to keep people fresh, and then you can go and eat and do all of that stuff, take a break. But realistically, there's only so many people who are going to be able to be on your drive team and on your pit team anyway. So it's a matter of, would you rather be just sitting in the stands watching, or would you rather be contributing to the team still through through numbers, because it is one of the largest factors which can decide the outcome of a game, really. It's a pretty important one.
Yeah, so I know 3132 has some interesting ways of motivating, which I want to steal at the first available opportunity. But yeah, we do the rotation. It's also a respect thing in one way. If the scouts know that the rest of the team respect them and value the job they're doing, that's a huge motivation. Yeah, so.
Yeah, and we also had a problem with this last year, so we decided to do a short presentation similar to this to show how scouting really helps and why we do scouting during the game and during regionals, and how it really helps us. And I guess usually the students realize the real reason we do scouting, and at the end of the day, I think that kind of changes their mindset about it too.
Just a little bit on the subject of members being sad they aren't hands-on with robots at the comp. That we have had an experience with that in the past. And as a result, we have a rule on the team now that's like broadcast before anyone signs up, and it's headed, not everyone can drive the robot. So we try and set expectations early on that if you're going to be in contact with the robot on game day, you have to be very competent, and you're a very small group of people, and you're definitely going to be in the minority. Scouting is the way for you to have a really big influence over how your team performs, often way bigger than anything you can do in the pit or by moving the joystick.
Also, thinking realistically in terms of logistics, if you have a small enough team to be rotating out your pit crew and drive team every few matches, then you probably don't have enough people to be doing full scouting anyway, and you're going to need everyone you can to be watching what's happening with the matches.
Now, just on the Blue Alliance too, which Ian just put up, yeah, you can get any data from any FRC team from any season, and often a lot of video footage as well. So if you've got some spare time, go look up your own team and view their history over the years, and you get some very interesting outcomes.
It should also be said, though, that that is not something that it's not really something that we look at when choosing alliances or judging how good a team is from a year to year, because you can have drastic changes in between, you know, completely different competitions with completely different rules, completely different robots, right? One year a team could make an amazing robot that does everything right, and then the next they could have one that just blows up.
Yeah, agree. Although there is one thing that I do find does carry over. If you have a bad experience with the team in terms of playing strategy, politeness, that bad experience has a tendency to hang around. So I guess this is a really good time to re-emphasize the fact that treating other teams with gracious professionalism, positivity, and just doing your best to play well with others can have a huge, huge impact years down the track.
Definitely. Is that all the questions we have?
Yeah, we're all good on this end. You guys go ahead.
Awesome. So in terms of how to scout, we and how us as teams scout, we've kind of touched on this quite a bit now, the philosophy of the scouting, and it really does make the difference in between a loss game and a won game in multiple occasions. It's not necessarily always the deciding factor, but it is definitely one of the major ones. It is an insanely important role, and I know it's kind of not being able to get hands-on with the controller is not always the most exciting task, but it really does have a large impact on the outcome of games and how you even strategize for future seasons and how your robot can perform not only this year but from in the years coming after that. In terms of how, as a team, in terms of how all of our teams here today do scouting, we have a few things in common. So we have, if people allow, so on any main competition, we'll have a dedicated scouting team, and there will always be someone who is managing the data side of things, which could be your collection, your spreadsheet, whatever it may be. However you're taking in and processing that data, we'll always have someone who knows their way around that and is able to solve any problems. And then we also have a strategy lead. Now, some teams we have the strategy lead, the person who kind of strategizes from the data that we collect. For some teams, that is a drive coach who is talking to the team, to the drivers and human players and technician, and going, okay, this is what we're going to be doing. And in other cases, it's someone else who has the data and explains to the drive coach, and that's just an easy way to get another set of eyes on the data and see what people think the alliance that you're going against is potentially going to do in that game, so you can maybe strategize against it. Pit scouting, again, we all do it. We all should do it. If you're a team who's getting into being very serious with scouting, it's extremely important, especially as I think it was Isaac said, or maybe it was Andrew, with this year's competition, knowing the height and weight is extremely important. You may need to know if you can climb with them, or if they can fit under the tunnel so they can get through there, because that can be much faster. So there's a lot of things to consider in terms of that. But again, make sure when you're doing that, you have people who know what they're talking about and know the game very well. So that's another thing, going back to previously when we were talking about, okay, how do we prepare as a team for the game when we're going to be scouting and others are going to be scouting us? Know the rules and make sure you know them very well, and know what you're looking for in other teams, because that is going to be something extremely important when you do your evaluation of other teams and their robots. In terms of individually, what do we do at IC? We have 6 people watching every game, and we have one person watching each robot on the field. Now, how we have our system, which we'll touch on later, is we have everyone on an individual device and they enter in all of the data. So we try and rotate, if the numbers allow, of course, we try and rotate every 2 or 3 games to keep people fresh. Just, again, keep people motivated and still happy to come back and enter in data, because it does get, at some point you need to just, have a break and reset a bit. But yeah, that's essentially our system. It's pretty simple in terms of what we do. It's just, 6 people, 1 on each robot, and entering the data, and then we do all of the processing later on, which we'll discuss in the next few slides. But I'll pass it on to Project Bucephalus for their scouting information.
Right, so how we do it, we actually, which we'll mention in a little bit, we have a system where we actually share the load with other teams. So we sort of collaborate, and that's how we're able to watch every game and reduce the load. It means we've got to share information too, which actually has additional benefits, but it does reduce the individual load. So we actually have 2 scouts per robot. We've only got 1 device per robot, but that second set of eyes drastically reduces error. So we did it 1 device, 1 person for a while there, and our error rate basically went away when we had 2 people doing it. There's still mistakes made, we're only human, but that's a huge thing if you have the manpower to do that. That means you've got 12 people watching every game, which sometimes, the only reason we can do that is we share with other teams. We also have a couple of super scouts watching matches. They typically won't watch all matches. They'll pick the ones they want to see. I sort of leave it up to them to decide their best judgment, because if you're a super scout, I trust your opinion and I want to see what you come up with. So when we rotate, we'll do 1 hour of scouting followed by 1 hour off. There are, again, some students on the team that scouting is their idea of fun, and they will stay there way longer if I let them, but there are limits. Now, one of the things we do is we do make sure the drive team meets where the scouts are, so the drive team can communicate with the scouts how well they're doing, pass on feedback and encouragement, and generally make the scouts feel they are actually part of what's going on. When the scouts are isolated, that tends to produce some bad feeling.
And with the drive team going over to where the scouts are to talk, it does also mean that if they have questions about a particular team, instead of having the data to look at, most of the time they can actually ask someone who's been watching that team in previous games and get their own opinion of how things have been going.
All right, so 3132, take it away.
Yep. So we do similar things as well. We have 2 scouts per robot. We try to get 2 people scouting per robot, but that may not be possible in some cases, but at the end of the day, that is our goal. This also integrates with our buddy system, which is where the scouts choose a buddy to be with. So if one of them has an emergency or needs to take a break, it can be dealt with really easily. We also have 2 super scouts. These scouts take the responsibility to look at the subjective point of view. For example, the driving quality, the defense capability of a robot. Are they reliable? Are they good game players? Are they positive during the game if they can see? So more of the subjective kind of things. We also have, we try to entertain our scouts because we need to keep them motivated, but it's really interesting because scouting is already very entertaining. But scouting can get really intense when you're scouting match after match. So we were thinking of some ways to entertain our scouts. We brainstormed a couple of ways and we came up with a betting game. We haven't really implemented it yet, but this is where scouts take an educated guess, merch or food or something similar to that. That's about it.
Okay, so are there any questions on the stream, Winona?
We do. So we just have one question, which I find interesting, and there may or may not be a difference, but do you have any recommendations for scouting at overseas events or championships? So is there a difference in your tactic when you're in Australia and then when you're against or not against, when you're working with those overseas championship level teams?
Yeah, there are some differences. You want me to go first, guys?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the biggest difference we find overseas is in logistics. Getting reliable internet overseas can be a pain or expensive. So we sort of build our systems so that we don't need internet. We can get by without it or with minimal. If we're traveling overseas, we tend to have less manpower because not everyone might go to the competition in Sydney, but not everyone's going to pay to go to Houston. So that sort of makes our collaborative model even more important. We can go over, we just got to introduce ourselves to other teams and see who wants to help out. And there's usually enough teams in the same boat as us that they're willing to jump on board. As long as you're in the same division, of course. Other than that, it's bigger, it's better, it's louder, and the stakes are higher. So what do you guys think? Ella?
Yeah, I think that sums it up perfectly, really.
Yeah, see, I would have actually, interestingly, I would have kind of said well, not necessarily the opposite, but I don't think we have necessarily less people, maybe slightly less people when we're at Houston, but it wouldn't be a large amount less, I don't think, in terms of students who are at this point, like, I think you have to talk about how often you're going, of course, and that affects it as well. But if it's not a regular thing where you're asking people to, spend that money once a year, and it's something that's more kind of affordable, that way, then I think you end up having quite a few people, and it doesn't really change the system. Maybe, of course, you should be serious about it no matter what competition you're at. But if you do get to Houston as a team, you should really, really be focusing on your scouting. If you haven't been so far doing as much as you could, step up your game and do it as much as possible.
Yeah. I'll also add a little bit on that one. I talked about teams having long memories for bad behavior. At Houston, the same thing is true. They have long memories. If your team does something positive, you'll be remembered for it. You're sort of, even if you're only there once, getting a positive reputation amongst international teams is something that can be invaluable to your team later on, and you can learn a great deal from others. So taking it seriously and doing your best to put a professional foot forward will make a big difference.
And I guess kind of on another note as well, between the regional and the championships, you have time to gather feedback from your scouts and update your scouting system. So it can be a very useful experience to do that. So then you could be scouting differently at championships based on that feedback. But yeah, it depends.
Any other questions, Winona?
Yeah, so we have one more question that says, how do you deal with the language barriers when you're overseas? There we go.
So we hope really, really strongly that we have someone that speaks that language in our team.
Good luck.
When it comes to, we've had a few Mandarin speakers. We've even got a Turkish speaker at the moment and a Russian. So yeah, other than that, we find a translator as quickly as we can. Isaac, you get around language barriers with visual aids, don't you?
Yeah, so I'm the drive coach on the drive team, and usually for planning out strategy, I'll bring with me a small whiteboard with a clipboard and markers, so we can plan out like robots' movement and just have that visual aid to communicate with other teams about what the strategy is for the match. In terms of language barrier when doing scouting, we've designed our scouting system to have as little text on the screen as possible. It's very visually based, so we'll have an image of what the scoring element is, and you tap the red button if they failed and the green button if they succeeded, little things like that. Because yeah, when there's a language barrier, visual communication tends to be something that's fairly universal.
So 31, 32, you're old hands at this. How do you deal with it?
Similar to Project Persepolis, we see if we do have any speakers. I mean, we see if we have anyone in our team that speaks a language that we can't translate. Otherwise, we try to find a translator. Yes.
Mitch, have you encountered that one at all?
No, I think you guys have covered it pretty well.
Is there anything else, Winona?
So we do have just one more question. In terms of PB's, meaning Project Bucephalus' collaborative model, is the data being collected and being uploaded straight to the cloud, or is it uploaded and processed at a later time in the event?
We'll touch on that when we go into our systems, but basically it's coming into a central point that any of the teams that are there collaborating can access. It's not usually on the cloud though, because I said we try and operate on a system where we don't need internet. So it's usually a central point, and we have if we've got 6 teams working together, we'll have all 6 strategy teams sitting around that point and grabbing that information, which can be a lot of fun actually.
Super good. And it sounds like you're going to touch on that in just a bit in your systems talk anyway.
Anything else?
Nope, that's it. Excellent. Let's go.
Okay, Mitch, take it away.
Yep, no worries. So in terms of how we gather data, we use a online Google Sheet and Google Form system. So this is a screenshot of what our input section would look like. So this is from Deep Space, where we would have just a range of data that you could input. And again, because we had it's all within our team, everyone was relatively trained on how to use it beforehand, and we ran practice runs before the competition while actually creating the system and the scoring for the system, which I should mention is also probably something you can do if you're looking at designing your own system. Test it with sample data, whether it be made up or from another competition that you found on, say, the Blue Alliance, or with a live stream. Test it before you go to your competition. So we use a Google Form system, and it goes straight into a Google spreadsheet. And we have a lot of processing in the back end, but essentially it will all come out as this one selection. So what we can do here is we have a leaderboard of the top 8 teams according to our scouting data, which we can select. It will give us the team's performance over time for each qualification game they've played. It will give us average information about their autonomous, their teleoperated, and their endgame stuff. And it will also give us detailed team information. So essentially, we would have someone during alliance selection and beforehand, of course, but also during alliance selection, we'd have someone with the data, and they would look, and that would also influence not only who they would make an offer to if they're the first robot in the alliance, but also if someone offers us a spot, we're able to very quickly go, okay, how have they performed over time? Are they a decent team? And of course, we should look at that before the scouting, before the alliance selection process begins. But if you do need to look up something, it's relatively quick and easy to do so as well. And yeah, I think that's kind of us done.
Okay, so we'll look at ours now. So as I mentioned, we do a collaborative approach, but we also try and do visual. So we use a database. So this is a mock-up of the data entry form. We have it run on devices where we can, and we have a few things. So at the moment, you can see we're in the Sandstorm tab. So this is from, again, Destination Deep Space. So in here, you tick on a button for a green is a success or a red is a fail. So we're able to say, for example here, this team had 2 goes at delivering a hatch panel and only got 1 of them. So 50% success rate, and all you have to do is tap on buttons. So there's some drop-down boxes saying what they did and where they started with. And then we go into a teleop phase, and then we have ratings. So ratings is where we do our subjective information, like scouts do comments, they'll rate how well the robot's been moving, how reliable it is, flag a team that may look bad in the numbers but are really, really worth a good look at, or vice versa. Flag a team that does excellent in numbers but you really want to have a good look at them before you pick them, maybe because their robot looks like it's about to fall apart or anything like that. So we up here, we keep tab of things like yellow and red cards as well. And each match we have 2 people working on the one device to record that information. Now that goes, is recorded on the local device. We have somebody who will then collect that information. Usually that info is recorded as a QR code, which is scanned by a collector, and then that information ends up in the central database. Now we run a whole mess of queries on that analyzes the data, spits out anything that looks wrong for the data manager to look at. One thing that is also short to mention here, one thing that happens a lot with scouting is people double scouting the same team, losing track of who they're supposed to be scouting. So we added this little feature in the top left corner, top right corner, and it brings up a box saying, okay, you're scouting drive station 1, you look at the team that's standing right there. And that also cut down on a lot of errors. So once we've gathered that information, we then are able to produce our reports. So this is one half of a match report. So we'll have one of these for the Red Alliance and one for the Blue Alliance, all on an A4 sheet of paper. And Isaac, you want to explain how that works?
Yeah, sure. So let me grab the annotate thing. Okay. So the red and green markings, those just indicate if a team is or isn't capable of completing that particular thing. On each line, you've got the top row here. We'll pick a different color so that you can actually see.
I'll do it for you.
Yeah. Okay, so the top row there is their total across the entire competition, and the bottom row is their 4-match rolling average. This section right here, that's how often they make it across the auto line. And then each of these rows across here, we've got the average, maximum, and percentage accuracy for each task. So coming down, looking at our score down here, at this point in time, we had an average of 4.7 game pieces being scored in teleop. We scored a maximum of 7 in a match. And we've got 100% accuracy when we've attempted here. And actually, I think you grabbed the screenshot from when the form was broken because those numbers don't add up.
Yep.
Yeah, nobody's perfect. We do have a few bugs in our data reporting system.
Yeah.
We should have a look at that later. But that's the percentage accuracy for the scores in the other columns. Over here, we've got how many times, so self-climbed, we've got how many times they climbed by themselves with one robot, 2 robots, and 3 robots. As you can see down here, this team has actually managed to do a triple climb 6 times.
No, that's climbing to the 3rd level 6 times.
Oh, sorry. It has been a long time since I've actually looked at this data. Yeah. Oh, all right. Yeah. And then the second column was the assist, whether they were assisted by someone else or you assisted another team.
So this report is designed that if you want the high level data, you can drill down. If you want the low level data, you can drill down into the numbers and get specifics. But if all you want is the basics, you look at the red and the green, and then you look at this center column there, and you find out how many objects they deliver. And you get a rough idea from that. You can infer cycle time and all the information you might need. So this is a report designed to work on multiple levels. So it may be overkill, but it does mean that we only have to produce one output for everyone, and we can produce one of these for every match in a couple of seconds. Now, that then leads us, all that information is then used to produce our pick list. So when we have our collaborative teams, every team has their own priorities. So we do custom queries for each team. They click on a button and it generates this for every team, for your team. So the way we work it is we have 2 sections. We have the primary listing, which is these teams up here. Those are the teams that match our criteria for a first pick, ranked by the qualities we're interested in. So as we go through, so some of these are going to be alliance captains. So when the alliance person marks off that they are a captain, they will be removed from that list, which means that you don't have to worry about picking a team that's already been picked. Then you have the secondary listing, which is down here, which is everybody that is not on the primary list, ranked by the qualities we are most likely going to be interested in. So again, if they're picked by somebody, you mark off, you click this little button over here, and they're removed from the list. So as the teams are selected, you end up with only the teams that are remaining, which makes life as an alliance captain so much easier. Okay. All right, 3132, take it away.
Okay, so we've kind of taken a different approach in the past 2 years. So we've decided to design an app that allows you to collect scouting data. So previously we've been using Google Forms, but we decided to be a bit more focused on scouting and see what we can do. So I've just picked out 2 screens from the app here, which is the tally up and the end game. So it just features different buttons that you can press. These are from this year. So these are like buttons that you can press to indicate if they've scored in the higher goal, the low goal, and these numbers increment. And you can tick where they scored from on the field just to make it easier for us to understand so they don't clash with the path that our robot would normally take. And you can mark if they got any fouls or anything to determine if there would be a reliable robot to play with. And then similarly on the endgame page, it's kind of more subjective data and data that we are collecting throughout the match. So you can come in here and put stuff in the comment box, anything that's objective that you think is important that should be identified about how the robot plays, if they're defensive, if they're good at driving, stuff like that. Also any issues that the robot may have had throughout the game, and also if they were climbing. We just have different radio buttons and check boxes so you can select multiple. And I just want to also emphasize the importance of having a backup scouting system as well, because last year especially we had designed an app to use and we really wanted to go ahead with it, but it wasn't working in time for the competition, so we had to make a Google form the day of the competition, which really wasn't ideal, but it still worked anyway. So just make sure you have a backup just in case something does go wrong. But yeah, and we've also experimented with different communication methods for getting the information on and off the app, because the information is collected on iPads and we obviously can't technically use Wi-Fi. So last year we tried using a QR code, but that wasn't as effective, but we should probably try it again. And then this year we've kind of gone for a more complex system. We're not entirely sure if it works yet because we haven't had a chance to test it because we haven't had any competitions, but we describe it as the octopus, where it's kind of like a modem that's connected to the iPads through a switch and wires, and then that directly communicates to the laptop where we're feeding it into a database and then into a Google Sheets. It's a bit complex and we're not entirely sure if it works, so I don't know, you can try it, but yeah, that's kind of what we're looking to use for future. And then this is kind of like a look at our Google Sheets from last year at Houston. This is when we were using a Google Forms to collect all the information because the app wasn't working. So it lists all the teams that were in our division along here, and then it outlines the amounts of matches they've played and the cycles that they've done and how many cycles they are able to complete in a match, how much cargo they're able to score, the average of that, and same for the hatches. So it was just a very useful way of concisely understanding the capabilities of a team and if they would be advantageous to us. And then I'm still not entirely sure how this works, but this was another feature of our form last year where we could input a match number and it would take the data from the form, from the rest of the spreadsheet, and kind of determine what the likely outcome of a match would be. So you can see here we put in match number 65 as an example, and it lists all the teams on each alliance, and it gets the information of like the average hatch cycles, average cargo cycles, and like the average amount of scores that they get in each section, and kind of calculates it all together to get a predicted score and then a predicted winner from that. So I mean, that's kind of cool thing to do if you want to, but yeah, that's about it.
So I'll just touch briefly on this one. I've mentioned the collaboration aspect. You don't actually have to do this alone. Like we started our collaboration system because we didn't have the manpower to do it alone. Now, you don't have to join our system. You're quite capable of doing it yourself. Form scouting alliances with other teams. It's a great way to build relationships with one another and build each other up. And you share the load, you share the data, and everybody wins. Now, I will say, like with our system, it does make for some very surreal moments, particularly when you've got teams that have multiple teams in your scouting alliance have reached the finals, and you've got opposite sides of a finals match getting the same information at the same time from the same data source. It hasn't actually resulted in anything negative. It's actually been highly amusing, but it's also a good way to really show GP and co-opetition when you have that situation, because even if you're on opposite sides, your work still matters to each other. So I tend to think that is something that's very worthwhile. Okay, so we got any questions coming out of that one, Anna?
No, not so far. We're all good. You guys can keep trucking.
Okay. Did I answer that question about our system from before, do you think?
Yeah, I believe so, actually.
Okay.
Well done.
Right. Take it away.
Oh, wait, sorry, hold on. This is the last minute one. There was a buzz. Okay. Do you do any scouting of other divisions at championships?
I guess this is kind of where the collaboration comes into play, because I remember last year we assigned one person in our team the role of communicating with some other teams from other divisions so we could collect information from them and understand the capabilities of the other robots. But I guess this is only really a thing you consider if you are doing well in your own division and potentially making it to Einstein, but that's how we kind of did it.
We're not good enough to even think about getting to Einstein, so we haven't bothered yet. How about you, Mitch?
Yeah, we don't really do that so much, but I feel like even without, I think there's two ways of going about it. Again, the collaboration is one way that you can attack it. Also, just looking at the Blue Alliance, again, it's not going to give you the most detailed data ever, but you're probably also going to want to not use that much of your data from previous competitions anyway. So if you just want a baseline of how a team has done with their robot in a particular competition, the Blue Alliance, pretty useful tool. It'll give you a relatively good idea, and you can look at specific videos they've played in, or specific matches, videos of matches they've played in to get a good idea of how they perform as well.
Okay, take it away, 3132.
Okay, so when it comes to competition, there are always issues that could occur, and there's always things that you must take into consideration beforehand before you even start designing your scouting system. So first of all, we kind of touched on this earlier, but especially in the Sydney regionals, there is no Wi-Fi in the stands and you cannot use hotspots. So it's important to design your scouting system around this specification. So try and work out alternative methods to upload and relay data, such as using QR codes or other methods, and just being careful about these restrictions, because you can get in trouble for using hotspots, so you don't exactly want to risk it. Human error as well. This is just a self-explanatory one. People do make mistakes, and that is understandable. So, and that also, this can also be eliminated by, as mentioned before, having a buddy system or having two people scanning at the same time to minimize that rate of human error. But just keep that into consideration when you're checking over your data. Also spoken about before, but numbers and burnout and trying to maintain the maximum amount of people that you can when you're scouting. So especially if you're on a smaller team or if you're traveling overseas and you have a smaller number of people, just it's hard to assign enough people to scout, so just be careful. I know that this year we didn't have enough. You were going to compete at the Silicon Valley regionals, and we didn't have enough students, so we were getting parents that were traveling with us trained up on the scouting system, so we could use their skills as well. So kind of having to rely on things like that, and burnouts as well. Like, people aren't going to be able to sit in the stands for hours on end, so just make sure that you have enough food and water and motivation and entertainment for people to keep on going. Devices as well. We use iPads, and some people use phones or laptops, and I'm pretty sure there's no PowerPoint in the stand. There are some around the arena though, but making sure that your devices are well charged and ready to go at the start of the day, and just making sure they don't die on you, because then you could potentially lose your data. Similarly to that, access to power as well, like bringing in portable chargers if necessary. As I said before, there's limited access to power in the stand, so just be aware of that. And also, kind of touched on that before, having like QR codes or another offline solution to upload your data, or just storing it on the iPads until later. And some teams even still use paper methods. Like, I wouldn't recommend this, it's quite old school, but some teams do that, so if you really need to rely on it, then I guess you could. And also another important factor especially is picking a viewing point, because if you've been to the arena before, it's quite big and there are a lot of different spaces that teams can sit, and they do fill up fast, and sitting in different spaces gives you different perspectives on the game, especially if you're scouting a specific team or alliance. So just taking that into consideration, or having like people spaced out across the stands if that's what you want. And then picking a priority, especially when designing your scouting system. If you want it to be, if it's something that you really want to focus on, if you like have the manpower or have developed your team enough to do that if you're not a rookie team, or just something that you want to develop quickly, like a Google Forms, or you don't have enough. Yeah.
So
I have a couple things to add there, actually. So
yep.
I think there's a couple of things to consider here. So especially if you're a new team and if you're looking at or a newer team, right? And you're looking at getting into a serious scouting system and creating that. If you're looking at creating that yourself, there's a couple of pointers that I just kind of thought of while we were talking here. Not only, I think, should you have a look at devices and access to power, but also look at what devices you're choosing. If you're a team and you're, say, going to supply a device to do the scouting on, for example, then you also have to look at battery life, how long that's going to last in use. Because again, you don't want that to be dying, even if it's fully charged at the start of the day and you've done everything right, you don't want that to be running out halfway through the day and then you're stuck with nothing. Also, in terms of the online solution, again, this is really only applicable if you're looking at developing your own solution for scouting data, but a couple of ways to go about it, especially if you're looking at tablets, which tend to have better overall battery life, which could be a better option in terms of devices there. Bluetooth is actually, in situations where there's zero Wi-Fi, peer-to-peer Bluetooth connection is definitely something to look at if you're developing your own system. Just a couple of ideas to get you kind of thinking. If anyone else wanted to add anything.
No, I think we covered everything we need there. Any comment, Winona?
Nope, we don't have any questions just yet. Thanks.
Okay. So, Isaac, take it away.
Yep. So, going through with how we actually use the scouting data, particularly with other teams. So the main thing we'll use it for is using to predict an opponent's focus and abilities. So by looking at the patterns in what they've done in matches, you can tell what areas of gameplay they're likely to focus on and what they can and can't do. A particularly good example of this was in 2016 Stronghold, where alliances could actually pick what defenses were set up on the field. Due to our scouting in that year, we were able to fairly consistently stop the other alliance from being able to score maximum points from their defenses, because we were able to pick ones that we knew that their teams couldn't all complete, which made it harder for them to strategize what they were going to be doing during the match. It not always as big of an effect as it was in Stronghold as in other years, but it's still something very useful to know. For instance, in Deep Space, what robots are likely to be focused on doing the cargo ship or focused on doing the rockets on the sides. Second thing that having all this data is good for is you need to be able to understand your own capabilities. Have your scouting team scout your own robots matches so you can see how you stack up against everyone else, and just have that kind of baseline to tell apart how teams are doing performance-wise compared to you. With all this data, you can also create a game plan before talking to your alliance partners. You don't want this to be something that's set in stone and come in saying, right, here's the plan, we're doing this, but rather have a general idea of how all of you could work together and have a strategy plan for a particular match, so that you don't end up with all three of you just sitting around going, oh, I don't know what we could do, maybe this, maybe this. Have a clear vision of here's something that we could do. And if your scouting is good enough and the other team's scouting is good enough, more often than not, your pre-match strategies will tend to line up in most ways. With our game plans, we divide that into 4 sections. We've got the autonomous period. During that time, you need a fairly tight layout of how the robots are going to be moving so that they don't collide with each other and so that you know what everyone's going to be doing. In Teleop, they're less specific about where everything's going to be going, but you do need to know where robots are going to be moving back and forward. So you might say that team 1 is going to be traveling on the left side of the field, team 2 is using the right side of the field, and team 3 is playing defense down the far end up against the other alliance wall, for instance. In the end game, you need to have a plan for where your robots are going to be positioned, how long they take to perform their end game actions once they're in position, and how they're going to get back there without getting in each other's way. And then fourthly, you need to have some form of backup plan. What if everything goes wrong? What if one of your robots fails or you're being hit with heavy defense? What can your robot do if the game plan has to change mid-match? And then when you go and talk to your alliance partners, you want to have a conversation with them, change it based on input. Ideally, you want to have a strategy that all 3 teams are comfortable with and are confident that they can pull off successfully. That works to the best of all 3 teams' abilities.
And yeah, the last point, particularly important, I think, make it a conversation. Like Isaac said, don't go in and say, you will do this because I say so. That's a really good way to hack off everybody you come in contact with. So you guys want to add anything to that one?
No, I think you guys covered most of what we thought was important.
All righty.
And we have a question, a really good one. It's diabolical, actually. So what do you do when students are on the verge of drop kicking your scouting tablet across the field? What do you do?
If that's Luke, I'm going to have words with you, sunshine. We talk to our scouts very gently and remind them to be good children. And then go let them take a break and imbibe some sugar.
Right. So are we talking students on your team or or others, right?
Right. I think it's students on your team, like dealing with your own like tablet. Like, how do you deal with that? Yeah.
Yeah, protective case.
Oh, good idea. Put some armor on that puppy.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, good. So we do have another question. Does Project Bucephalus allow new teams to join the collaborative scouting system? If so, is there some sort of criteria to join the scouting team?
Yeah, we take new people every year. The only real criteria is you're keen and you've got enough warm bodies to fill seats.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah, we do. There have been a few times where we've gotten bad information from team scouting, but we've just talked to them and gone, hey, we noticed that you missed a few things. Please try to pay more attention next time. Make sure you're taking regular breaks. And to prevent that sort of thing from happening, if it's like a particular team's doing it too much, we'll pair them up with another team. So you've got 2 people from different teams watching the same robot.
Okay, anything else, Winona?
No, that's it. We can continue. Just letting you guys know it's around 9 o'clock.
Cool. Okay, well, I think these are the last things we go through. So what we've got here, we've got a video of ours of using a strategy in action, and then 3132 has a video of their strategies in action. So you can see how scouting can turn the tide of a match. So this game here is Steamworks back in 2017. This year sort of goes down in infamy for our team as being the worst robot we built. It was our second robot, but we still had a reasonably good run. So we are on the blue alliance, and I believe that this is our robot in the corner down here. So we're just going to advance a little bit and see what's happening.
1, go!
Qualification match.
1, go!
Qualification match number.
So the first thing you'll notice in this game is the team numbers. On the Red Alliance, we have some very old teams. Now, old team doesn't necessarily mean good team, but there are some pretty good teams in that mix. On the left, we have some younger teams. So we all got together and cooked up how we're going to deal with this. So at the start of the match, we knew that, I forget the team number, but one of these teams, I think it was this guy coming through right now. Well, they've got the back here. They required 20 seconds to climb. We knew that from watching previous games. We also knew that they were going to be trying to get the fuel and the rotors. They were going to go for the extra ranking points. So that information told us that, let us predict what they were going to be doing and what we had to do to slow them down. Lastly, we then had a look at where all our robots were going to go and made sure we were not colliding with each other. So if we go back down to here.
Number 87 underway, correction 85. Red Lions comes out shooting 987 high rollers. A lot of their fuel is going too far. Some of it's making it in. 14, 16 kilopascal. Blue Alliance tried some shooting there too, 54, 68.
Right, you see our robot in the whoops, sorry. See our robot in the
1, go!
7 underway, correction 7 high, some kilopascal, 54, 68.
Our robot's in the foreground right now. It is not going to score points. It is getting in the way. So you watch it, it's going to interfere with
chaos
the robot
theory.
coming.
They got nothing in their boiler. No joy from all their
We're
shooting.
slowing them down.
Red Lions takes a
We're
101
not
to 75
slowing
lead
them.
as the
We're stopping them.
students
from
take
scoring.
control of the robots.
So now blue robots cross over and we go and grab our gear.
High
while the
voltage
other
grabs
ones
the
are
gear there. High rollers grabs the gear, heading down.
Here we come back.
Alliance partner 1311 Kel Robotics just waiting in the wings there
Deliver
for their
our
alliance
item.
partners to get out of the feeder station.
One of the other blue teams is slowing down the red ones and going for their points. Here we come back into the middle again.
Here comes high
Crossover.
rollers, pummeling more fuel in, a little more accurate here than they were in the autonomous phase.
And we're about to start
38
switching
kilopascal,
into delay
39,
mode.
40, they made it. 40 kilopascal in the red boiler.
So we're messing with red again.
Both alliances working on their third rotor. Red requires
We're gonna-
one gear, blue
We're going
requires
to try and
two.
drop this off. Then we're going to go back into the defense and delay mode.
For the Red Lions, 231 high voltage drops off that one gear.
We know the other team's going to come in.
Red Lions has their third rotor going.
They need 20 to
Blue Lions
climb.
slightly
They have
behind. They
20
require two. However, their pilots have it. They
You've got
place
a
it down
pile
and they get their third rotor going right now.
Middle,
37
take over,
seconds left.
we delay them further. 33 seconds.
Red Lions frantically
Two
trying
red
to get those
ropes.
gears.
We're in
They
there.
require about two more to get their fourth
The
rotor
ropes come
going.
down. Now the ropes are worth, climbing a rope gets you 50 points. So we've now successfully fouled up.
19 seconds
Last
left.
gen robot, there's now under
Red
20
Lions still
seconds
requires
left.
two more gears.
We are
1311 climbs
behind.
for the Red
We get
Lions.
all three robots.
231 for the Red Lions. High voltage. They try to drop off the gear.
8 seconds
They've got it. Here it comes.
7, 6,
97
5,
trying to do it. 5
4,
seconds left.
3,
Can they get this fourth rotor?
1.
2,
We got it.
1. Not enough time.
So that's an example of strategy winning a match. We slowed down this robot over here and prevented them from climbing. We anticipated their tactics and stopped them from scoring. Red was in front for most of the match. If that robot had gotten up to climb, we would have lost the match. But because we knew exactly how long we needed to climb, they had a whole second to spare, and we knew how long they needed to climb, we were able to pick our strategy. And so on paper, we were going to get mulched in that game. but through superior strategy, we pulled it off, and that's still one of our best games for showing just how important a good strategy and scouting data can be. Okay, 31-32, do your thing.
Okay, so this match is a little bit different. So this wasn't a qualification match, this was a finals match in Houston. And in this case, we really wanted to win, so we had to put our skills to the test and try and utilize the skills of all the robots on our alliance. So in this match in particular, the other two robots on our alliance were really good at scoring, so we decided to let them do that, and we decided to take up the position of playing a defensive robot, because we knew that the other robots on the other alliance were really good at scoring as well. So you'll be able to see in this match how our defense affects the turnout of the game.
2, 1, go! Here's our first finals match here on Carver.
So I'm pretty sure this is our robot. This one's our robot, the one that's still on the...
1746 quickly placing a hatch panel there onto the rocket ship. They place a hatch panel onto their cargo
So as you can
ship.
see, we instantly go over to the Red Alliance side and instantly start attacking the Red Alliance's robot to stop them from scoring the hatch panel on that rocket there.
It's a really close
And it
match.
works as they drop it.
31, it is tied. Our Australian friends 31-32 down here on the red side, trying to make it difficult for the Red Alliance.
And they're clearly unable to get past, so they can't score any hatches or pick any up at all, while the other robots in our alliance continue to score.
Getting a hatch panel. 7146 quickly working on this rocket ship over here. 71-79.
And it's affecting the scores already because we're still ahead and they're unable to score. Their robot is struggling with intaking as well. I guess it's the added pressure of the defense. So.
7-38. Blue Alliance has the lead. Paradise Robotics temporarily up on top of a cargo there. I think a flashback to our last match. 1746. They have a mechanism down. They have a suction mechanism that is now hanging down. This may be a problem. We'll have to be careful about that. 60 seconds remaining. Blue has a lead, 55-47. Under, down, under. Playing effective defense here.
And we're still able to push them out, and even if it doesn't stop them from scoring, it delays them from scoring at the very least.
At least being slowed down by our Australian friends. 43 seconds. It's a 1-point match. Blue Alliance has the lead.
And obviously it's really close, so
Paradise
the
Robotics
defense is
placing
impacting
cargo
it. The other robot on their alliance is defending as well, but it's a really important factor of gameplay, especially in the finals.
Blue has the lead.
And at this point we stop because a really important factor of this game was climbing onto the hab.
16
So, and one of our, a robot on our alliance could do a triple climb, so really wanted to get the points from that.
16-78, they're not
So this is kind of like also a defining factor of the game, understanding that their robots could also climb as well, and we really wanted to utilize our ability, and you can see that all three of the robots are climbing, so, and they're not climbing at all, so that was also another defining factor of the match. But yeah, it's just kind of getting scouting data to understand their strengths and also our strengths in comparison and combating that with defense.
Okay, you done, Ella?
Yep.
Okay, so is there any questions or feedback on how that worked?
No questions from the YouTube stream.
Okay. Well, I do believe that's brought us to the end of our presentation.
All right, excellent. Wonderful job. But do any of you have any last comments that you'd like to add to the subject of scouting? Anything left unsaid? Stone unturned. Now's your chance.
Well, I'll emphasize the steal from the best and invent the rest. Take what we've got and improve on it.
Okay.
And I think, yeah, just don't underestimate it. It's extremely, extremely important.
Yeah, there's like a lot of negative connotations associated with scouting for some reason in the FRC community, but don't listen to any of those. It's really good and it's really important. And it's also fun as well. Like you get to interact with the robots and see how the match is going. So don't underestimate it.
Yeah, definitely. Like I've been a drive coach for 3 or 4 years now, and it is very obvious when a team has or hasn't been getting reliable scouting information just based on how confident they are with their strategy and how well they're reacting to and anticipating what the other alliance is going to do. It makes a massive difference just having that extra bit of information with knowing what you should be doing.
And
Yeah.
sorry, go on, Magna.
Yeah, going back to Ella's point, I think it's really important to signify the importance of scouting within your team as well, because then we know that the students know the reason we scout, and at the end of the day, that's what really helps us and motivates ourselves to scout. But yeah.
And I do remember, so that match that I just showed from Steamworks, the reaction from our team when we won that game was insane. The scouts owned that victory and they knew it. And we had the drive teams from a couple of those teams come up and say, this was your match, we won because of this. So that is a really, really good feeling to have in your team, to know that you overcame really great odds and you stood up there, were able to really push your robot and make it do everything you needed it to do and designed it to do. It can be incredibly satisfying.
So I think it's safe to say that the scouting process is rather pivotal to the entire FRC process. At least I think so. You guys have convinced me tonight. Pivotal. Well, we want to thank you so much. Thank you to Magna, Ella, Andrew, Isaac, and Mitch for sharing all the details on your scouting techniques and tools tonight. It's very much appreciated. Thanks for taking time out of your busy Monday night schedule. And also thanks to Ian down in Melbourne. We thank you so much for helping us out tonight. All right, guys, have a fantastic night and tune in again next week. Thanks heaps. Ah, perfect. I think we have the all clear.